What happens a lot in relationships is that people end up just sort of reenacting their old patterns together and then having children. And so, usually if you haven't worked out your insecure patterns before having children, they just get worse after you have children, because in your insecure patterns, no one's getting their needs met. And that's a challenge and that hurts. Now you add children to the mix and there are more needs. So it is less likely that you're going to be able to meet some of those previous needs you haven't figured out how to meet with each other. So, in a perfect world, people would begin their process of having children with really exploring their attachment and trying to make sure that it's secure and they feel comfortable with each other and they feel ready to be, sources of support and strength for each other during a season that's pretty intense. Having kids is intense.
Hi, everyone. It is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidel, and I am here with
Christine Seidel, and together we have
Eli Harwood.
Okay, welcome, Eli. We're so excited to have you with us. Eli is also known as Attachment Nerd on social platforms, and we are going to be talking about secure attachment today. And this is such an important topic, and you are kicking us off on our season 3 premiere. So welcome, Eli.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, and then we're going to jump into the questions because we have a lot to cover today. Okay, so Eli Harwood, also known as Attachment Nerd, is a licensed therapist, author, and educator who has more than 17 years of experience helping people process relational traumas and develop secure attachment relationships with their children and partners. She is the author of the recently released book, Securely Attached: Transform Your Attachment Patterns into Loving, Lasting Romantic Relationships. Eli has 3 children, 1 husband, 1 cat, and an extraordinary number of plants. Okay, so that's good.
It's a lot. There's a lot to know. And, to be transparent, I actually have 2 cats now. We got a new cat. I've got to change my bio.
Right?
You need to upgrade that bio.
Like one more thing to add to my to-do list, right?
Yes, exactly.
Upgrade that bio. And so what are your cats' names?
Mink is our elder cat. She's been with us for 13 years. And then this right here is Henrietta. Henrietta is our new baby cat. She's only been with us for about 6 months. Mm-hmm.
Well, we are animal lovers here on the Ego Project. So
love it.
Are just as important as
human beings. Love it.
And sometimes they like to make cameo appearances, and they're welcome to.
Love it.
Okay. Eli, we're going to jump right in. We are very curious about how and why you chose attachment as an topic. Yeah.
So I grew up in a family system that was riddled with unresolved generational trauma, insecure patterns, and really the discovery of attachment was very personal for me. I was in my 20s and I just recognized that some of the struggles I was having around my close relationships and also around my sense of myself and my relationship to my needs was related to attachment. And so as I started digging into the research, I got motivated to go and become a therapist, because the more I understood the way that my early experiences had affected me, the more empowered I was to do something different and to feel different. And it helped me process and heal from some of those early painful experiences in my family system. I really joke that you either come to therapy as a result of some form of injury in your childhood that you've been working through and are working through, or you come to therapy because you want to be an expert on something. And I would say, even if that's why you think you're in therapy, it's probably not why you're a therapist, right? Like, we come because we've known wounding, right? You're drawn to healing because you've known wounding. And that is absolutely my story. And then the deeper I got into my clinical work, the more connected it all felt to me to attachment. I could make that link from almost every one of my clients. And then I became really passionate about making the work accessible, because through the early portions of my career, there was very little accessible information. And the information that was out there would kind of tell you, like, here's how you know what you are. But there wasn't a lot of information on how to transform insecure patterns into secure patterns, which is the promise of attachment. That's the beauty of attachment, is that it isn't static. It isn't genetic. It is something that can change as you change your relationships. So yeah, that's my story.
That's a
In
good
a
story.
nutshell.
I
Yeah.
love that explanation because attachment theory is fairly new in terms of being a theory that's being discovered and really,
Hitting the general public. Yes,
Mhm.
it
Yeah,
is only recently hitting the general public, even though it has it's one of the most well-researched topics in psychology or science in general.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
only recently becoming a part of popular discussion. And that's part of my goal, is that,
Mhm.
you know, it's really becomes integrated and normalized.
Right. Which, it's the first developmental stage. So to look at
Mhm.
it in depth
Mhm.
and to really understand it is huge.
Absolutely.
Right. Can you give us, for those who are not aware of attachment and
Mhm.
what it means, can
Mhm.
you give us a breakdown on
Mhm.
what the different types
Yep.
and where typically the
Yep.
attachment is formed?
Okay, so attachment is a drive, just like hunger is a drive and thirst is a drive. And it is a drive to cultivate close relationships as a form of survival. So the human brain body system operates best in connection. Okay? And we all kind of intuitively know this. Like, you think about the way that isolation is used as a form of torture, right? And we can all sort of sense like, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to be by myself, right? We're supposed to have other people, and specifically other people who know us well and can regulate with us. So attachment starts in our early life as the instinct to bond to our caregivers and for our caregivers to bond to us. Okay. But it doesn't end there. Sue Johnson, she's the creator of EFT. She likes to use the term from cradle to grave. And that's absolutely accurate. We have attachment figures our entire life through. You don't grow out of attachment. We all need to have people, our people. But the way attachment function shifts. So in infancy, attachment is absolutely necessary for survival. There's no story of an infant, crawling out of the uterus, finding some bark, some, leftover cherries and surviving in the woods. Like, it doesn't work like that. We rely on others to survive through infancy. But on that same token, we are not all born to caregivers with the same levels of competency for care.
Right.
So our attachment patterns are the adaptations that we cultivate in relationship to whatever type of caregiver we have. So let me go over those really quickly. If we have a caregiver who is highly warm, highly responsive to our tender needs, our distress, our cues, highly grounded, so they are able to be generally well regulated in their own nervous system, then we develop a secure pattern of relating. And that secure pattern is very simply summed up as reaching and receiving. So when we are in tenderness or distress as infants or as small children, our instinct is to move and get proximity to our caregiver, to stay close to them until we feel better, and then to receive the soothing and their presence as a form of soothing, and then re-regulate, and then go back out and play again. The second experience is caregivers who are consistently ineffectual with us. So that might mean they are highly anxious, and in their anxiety, they are always intrusively overbearing in responses to our needs. That could be that they're dismissive, that they respond to us with you're fine, get over it, everything's fine, or they ignore us or whatever. But what we know is if someone is consistently ineffectual, we develop an avoidant pattern. And what that means is not that we're avoiding attachment. We're avoiding expressing our tenderness and our needs to others. And so the two words that I would use to sum up that pattern are avoid and distract. So I'm going to cope by trying to move my attention away from my emotions. The third pattern we would call a resistant pattern is what happens when there is a caregiver who is intermittently available. So sometimes they're effectual. Sometimes they respond in a way that is soothing and is calm. Sometimes they don't. And that has to be inconsistent enough that our brain can't register a pattern. So if someone is sometimes in a bad mood or off as a caregiver, which we all are, that's not going to throw off your child's security. It's about if that is the pattern. If the pattern is that you are inconsistent,
Yeah.
then the child develops this resistant pattern. And the resistant pattern means this: I'm going to constantly scan my caregiver. I'm going to be hyper vigilant. I'm going to be nervous about them leaving. I don't want them to go away from me. But when they offer me presence and soothing, I do not soothe. I protest
Mm-hmm.
because it's adaptive to keep that caregiver's attention on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus if I calm and I soothe, well, then they might go away and I might not know if they'll be here the next time I need them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm.
And then the last category, and this is always so hard to talk about, these little bugs.
Mm-hmm.
But if a caregiver is frightening, so the caregiver themselves is a source of distress for the child, and that caregiver might have an abusive mentality, or they might be on meth, or they might have undiagnosed or untreated schizophrenia or serious bipolar, then a child develops what we would consider to be a disorganized pattern, which is that they have to respond in primal ways: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That's basically what becomes available to them because there is no refuge, right? So the avoidant child takes his refuge in distraction. The resistant child takes refuge in clinging. The secure child takes refuge in that comfort, in that process of co-regulating. But the disorganized child has nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
Bugs.
Mm-hmm.
So those are your 4 patterns of attachment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, actually, I really should say this: the 5th pattern we call earned secure attachment, which is anyone who grew up in resistant, avoidant, or disorganized situations and who puts in the healing work to learn how to be securely attached to other people.
Oh, I love that. Earned
Yeah.
secure. What a perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect way to say it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was so good. Thank you. And, there is no one listening that's not going to resonate with one of those.
Mm.
And, and also the earned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can put that work in. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, this is
Mm-hmm.
something that's learned,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is
Yeah.
something that it's adaptive. We learned how
Yes.
to survive in our environments, which means we can relearn something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, it's not a trait. It's not a genetic code. It's
Yeah.
literally relationally experienced. And so we can undo that. And what's fun is that sometimes people have those insecure experiences with their caregivers, and then they fall into other healing relationships with friends. I know a lot of people who'll be like, my parents were nuts, but my neighbor's parents were amazing. And so I just scooted on over there after school, and they learned the pattern from the Wilsons, whoever that was. And we can do that through therapists, through friends, through partners. There are lots of possibilities for healing in our attachment journey.
Mm.
Right.
love
And
that.
I think that explanation of patterns, right? Because at a very
Mhm.
young age, that's how we're making sense of the world, is by
Yes.
watching the patterns that are happening in the
Yes.
relationships. So even if your pattern with your caregiver wasn't perfect or great or
Yes.
healthy, looking and scanning for other patterns
Yes.
you see as healthy. And I think that
Yes.
a lot of times we don't know that until we move into those other developmental stages where we're watching peers or we're watching
Yes.
other authority figures in our lives, but really picking up on patterns and
Mhm.
learning that we can. And I think it would be great in schools if we could teach a little bit more of that emotional pattern making
Mhm. Mhm.
ourselves, so that we can see it sooner in
Mhm.
our relationships. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And having, teachers be equipped to understand the power of the relational aspect of what they're doing, right? Like,
yeah.
most of your students aren't going to remember, what
Mhm.
happened in Ethan Fromm, but they
Yeah.
are going to remember
Yes.
how you lit up when they walked in the room, or the ways that you attended to their failing grade with concern and not contempt, right?
Right.
Like, there's a
Right.
lot of opportunity for healing in the teaching student
So
relationship.
so much.
I
Yeah.
think you can also teach attachment through Ethan from.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely in there. I love that one, we're talking here about our individual attachment, and
Mhm.
then we bring that into a relationship,
Mhm.
and that person brings an attachment
Yes.
style, how
Yes.
they are attached, right? And then you bring children
Mm.
into
Mhm.
the mix. Can
Mhm.
you kind of give us some step by step what that looks like from the initial couple into bringing children into it,
Mhm.
and how attachment plays out through those dynamics?
Right. So one important thing to know is that in the developmental psychology research, which is the research I stand by the most because it's the most validated, it has the most longitudinal studies with it, we study attachment as a quality of a relationship as opposed to an individual. So, and that's important to know because as you listen to those categories, you might have related to more than one.
Mhm.
And that's because you likely had more than one attachment experience. So you might have had a mother that you had one dynamic with, a father you had another dynamic with, or a grandparent or a foster parent. Um, or then again, the other romantic relationships you've formed or best friendships you've formed. So we can experience some of all of those patterns based on who we're relating to and what their way of relating is. So as you come into partnership, you're both going to hold different experiences, and some of those experiences might be secure and some might be insecure. But what you want to do is come together and go, what is your story? What are you carrying? What is my story? What am I carrying? And how can we intentionally offer each other a safe, caring, connected relational space to process those past experiences and then to build a safe, lovely place for the future, right? Now, what happens a lot in relationships is that people end up just sort of reenacting their old patterns together and then having children. And so, usually if you haven't worked out your insecure patterns before having children, they just get worse after you have children because in your insecure patterns, no one's getting their needs met. And that's a challenge and that hurts. Now you add children to the mix and there are more needs. So it is
Yeah.
less likely that you're going to be able to meet some of those previous needs you haven't figured out how to meet with each other. So, in a perfect world, people would begin their process of having children with really exploring their attachment and trying to make sure that it's secure and they feel comfortable with each other and they feel ready to be, sources of support and strength for each other during a season that's pretty intense. Having kids is intense, right?
Mhm.
But since that's not what happens for most folks, the next step is, okay, I have my children, I have my partner. It's easy to go, how do I become a better parent? How do I fix because there's the kids and they're there and their needs are so immediate. But you really have to stop and pause and go, okay, I cannot become a better parent until I've really processed what it was like for me
Mhm.
when I was growing up with my parents.
Mhm.
How was I parented? What did I experience? What were the messages? How did I cope with those things? And then grieving what was insecure, holding on to any secure pieces, and there usually are some,
Right.
holding on to some of those pieces, grieving the pieces that weren't secure, and then being as regulated in our own nervous systems as we can, and using our partners for the support we need so that we don't lean on our kids.
Mhm.
That's such an important piece. It's
Yeah.
like my children are not here to regulate me. I'm here to regulate my children. And so how can I get what I need through friends, partners, therapists, myself,
Mhm.
so that then my kids are freed up to be kids.
Which I think that is such interesting work to do, and you probably have seen this in the therapy room if you're working, with parents or you're working with a child, and you're kind of working,
Yep.
on how the parents can kind of show up for the child
Yep.
differently,
Yep.
and then they start kind of going, oh, you know what? This sounds kind of like what my parents did to me or what my mom or dad did to me. And so how do you help people when they come to you and in their minds, they're kind of telling themselves a story that like everything was perfect in childhood. And, yes, I never knew if my, parents were going to get trashed that night and, like get in an argument. But, I mean, like we had food, we had clothes,
Mhm.
the most part was great. Like, how do you work with people in
In that
helping
space.
them understand, that it doesn't have to be this big T trauma in order to have
Mhm.
attachment wounding?
Mhm. I would say, I mean, I tend to use education a lot in therapy. So I will literally just stop someone and say, hey, I want to teach you a little bit about what we know about brain development.
Mhm.
And here's what we know. In order for a child to feel safe enough to explore the world, safe enough to be creative, safe enough to focus on their growth, they have to feel that there is an adult in their life, just one, but there has to be an adult in their life who is emotionally attuned to them, right? Who they can go to when they feel tender and experience supportiveness and understanding, who can reach for them and express delight and they can feel belonging with. And a lot of parents just don't know how to do that because they didn't get it. So if you didn't get that from your parents, it's not because they didn't love you. It's not because they didn't care or even try. It's because they just probably didn't have that experience themselves. And
Right.
so what we want to do for you and your child is we want to help interrupt the transmission of those insecure patterns.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we want to offer you and your child something different. And the only way to do that is for you to really begin to recognize that that wasn't what you had.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's going to be a little uncomfortable because you coped with your childhood in this very important way. You told yourself a story that went like this. This is not that bad.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was a
Mhm.
very important way to cope. I'm so proud of your younger child for coping like that. It's how you got through. But coping and healing are not the same thing. Coping is getting through,
Mhm.
healing is getting out the other side, right? And so if you want to help give your child a really secure experience, yeah, we gotta acknowledge that actually it was kind of bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Mm.
I love the way that you said that, because it's so often with parenting. Yeah, and I'm not a parent, but I was a child.
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
you, the wounding that you have and those
Yes.
attachment issues,
Yes.
uh, once again, we're always in movement, right? We're
Yes.
always doing things and we don't always notice them until
Mhm.
we are back having to give
Yep.
the love that we didn't receive
Yes.
or
Mhm.
soothe in a way we were never taught to soothe. And so
Yes.
we have to go backward into our childhood in order to be good parents.
Yes. That's
And I
right.
love that. And being honest about it and
Yeah.
saying it out loud, because people who've done healing, they know that whether it's an actual child or an inner child,
Yes, that's
they
right.
recognize that. Yeah. So I
Mhm.
love the way that you've put that into words, Eli.
I'm so
Thank
glad.
you. Yeah. You said a few times, and I think Christine did as well, about regulating your nervous system.
Hmm.
And I think that's so important. And I think people don't realize that during doing emotional healing and mental health healing and wounding, that you have to first be able to regulate yourself. And can you share with the listeners a little bit about what that means?
Yeah. So when we think about ourselves, we tend to think in pretty abstract ways, right? Our thoughts, our ideas, our emotions. But I find it's really helpful to remember that we are our bodies. Like this is me, this arm right here, flopping around. That's me. And throughout our bodies are our nerves, and our nerves are connected to our brain, right? Our nervous system is designed to help us activate and deactivate.
Mhm.
Okay. And our attachment figures, that co-regulation early on, are the primary way that we experience activation or deactivation of our nervous system. And so think of activation as like my heart's pumping really fast, I'm sweating, I feel the urge to fight, flight, freeze, run. And deactivation as like I'm zoning, I'm checked out, I'm disassociated, or I want to just fall asleep or stop thinking, right? When we are engaging other people, especially in moments when they are emotionally dysregulated or activated, we have to offer a presence, which means that we are not deactivated and we also are not hyperactivated. We have to offer presence. And so presence means I can feel you and I can handle what I feel from you. How do we get our nervous system to be in that space? Well, it's different for everybody because we all have different journeys, but I think a lot about like just the very simple practices of, are you feeding your body what you need? Are you resting when you have opportunities to rest? Like, are you drinking water? Are you experiencing, the type of sensory needs you have? I'm a hot sauce gal. I need a lot of stimulation. Like making sure that I am getting kind of the things that allow my brain and my body to feel astute and alive. But probably most importantly, do I have people in my world that feel warm, loving, and safe? Because when we have relationships where we can say, I'm having a bad day. I finished my second book and I feel all kinds of nervous about it for many reasons. And we can analyze me at another time. But one of them, I think is just like to write a book that says, here's how to securely parent people is, I don't know, like, I just know so many people are going to have so many big feelings about the book, right? Hopefully positive mostly, but there will be all kinds of tender feelings. So anyway, so I had some dysregulation after I've turned in my second manuscript and I'm going, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? This is, I was like overwhelmed. And I called one of my dearest friends and I said, I need you to read this and I need you to tell me if you think I should like put the kibosh on it or if it should go out into the world. Like, and I said to my husband, like, because he's read it, like, do you think okay, like, I need you to tell me, like, is this going to make the world a better place? Because if it's not, I can't do all the things that are involved in a book. Like, do you think this is, and he was like, oh my gosh. He's like, I'm still thinking about all of the things you wrote. And by engaging the people in my world, I could do this.
Yeah.
Right.
I felt that so strongly here because I think there's that idea that when we're healed, right, that we won't ever have insecurities or be dysregulated and you're someone here who does this as a living, who goes through this experience, and you vulnerably created something and you're going to share it with the world, and that is scary. It really is. And also, you are an expert in this area. People are turning to you for guidance, and that we're so vulnerable there to share that you still feel this.
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
Here are the steps that you took to help regulate your nervous system, right? And to receive. You reached out and you received.
Yeah. I let it in. I these are my people. They're the people I've chosen. And so they matter more than anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to let that be true. I also went on a run. Like, that's a helpful thing for me. And like, there's something about that bilateral stimulation. I think I do EMDR. So I feel like I get that kind of part of our processing. And it's like after a run, I'm always like, okay.
Well, and I think that, like, when you talk about regulating your nervous system, I think this conversation kind of started when the mindfulness movement started really coming out there, because so many people's like homeostasis is activated.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Or it's engaged, right? Like as culture, we don't really find a very neutral homeostasis. And then we have our kids who are like highly anxious and activated, but then you see mom or dad on the sidelines yelling and screaming, wow. And then when they spill their milk, what do you do? So they're constantly activated, even if they're giving praise or if they're correcting. And so our children, they find homeostasis in us. We find homeostasis in our community. So writing a book, to some extent, you're activated because you're bringing in information, you're, processing thoughts. So even knowing how to ground yourself and your nervous system, you may have moments where you need community to help bring back that neutral kind of homeostasis.
You always will. I think that's part of why I love Sue Johnson's quote, "Cradle to grave," is that, you don't arrive. There's no age at which you arrive and no longer need
I'm
support.
healed.
Yeah.
I'm healed.
Well, and I would argue like we can even be healed and healedish, but in a healed state, we rely on other people, right? Like, and truly, like in a secure state, what we find in the research is the more secure a grown-up is, the less likely they are to wait for other people to notice their needs. Right. And so you're just going to say, hey, can I have a hug? Instead of internally going, well, why aren't they noticing I'm sad? Why aren't they asking me if I want a hug? Right. Like, and so, yeah, we want to develop and grow into the type of people that are able to reach freely when we are in a place of dysregulation, and notice the dysregulation and release it, feel the feelings, say the words.
Well, I think that just goes to like the barrier that can happen through that wounding, the ego wounding, that barrier for just asking for a need.
Yes.
That's such a testament to as you heal and become more secure, there's no story that's playing in the background as to why you can't or shouldn't or wouldn't receive what it is that you need. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. There's a freedom. There's like and interestingly, well, the researchers have given all of these attachment patterns way too many names. So if you've ever felt confused about like, why are there so many names? It's because there's different researchers. They like different verbs or nouns. I get it. But what I was going to say is that sometimes secure attachment in adulthood is called free autonomous, which I think is interesting because what they're talking about is a free autonomous state of mind. They're not talking about you're free from a need of other people or you're autonomous in your emotional needs. It's that you don't have that back editing going on. You are able to just validate your own needs and ask for what you need.
I love that. That's awesome.
And I think also being prepared, just because you ask for your needs doesn't mean that the other person can meet them.
Correct.
It just means you'll be okay if they can't.
Well, and that you'll reach for someone else.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. And there is always there is somebody else. Like, and if there isn't a somebody else in the immediate, that's a moment to go, okay, I'm in spending my energy in relationships where people are not capable of giving me what I need. So let's start to cultivate other relationships. Let's find other people who might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. I know that.
Well, there's 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah, they're out there.
That's why I always look at it. I'm like, surely there's someone I can talk to.
Yes,
I can build a community of one more person.
Exactly.
For sure.
And not making light of attachment, issues, because one, I do truly believe understanding, learning, and healing your attachment strategy, if that's the right word for it.
Sure. Yep.
And regulating your nervous system are two of the most important things that you can do, because until you regulate and you understand how you're showing up, you're just going to keep repeating patterns.
That's right.
And you're not going to heal anxiety because that's a heightened nervous system.
Yes.
I think people are trying to treat the symptom and not the underlying cause.
That's right. That's exactly right. In my second book, I say, it doesn't matter if you read every parenting book on the planet. If you don't know how to create a secure relationship with your child, all those tips, tricks, and techniques will just fall flat, right? And so the same is true in close friendships, in romantic relationships. You can say all the right things, but if your nervous system says I'm anxious, like your partner or your people will absorb that anxiety as opposed to the connection from you.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. Well, we are the Ego Project, so we have to talk about ego.
Great.
And once again, talk about its vernacular, right? And we talk a lot about ego wounding here, ego wounding in parenting. And we're going to take that into relationship with romantic partner friendships, across as well. So what is your thoughts, of course, with the languaging around ego when it comes to parenting, and how does that work with attachment?
Well, so, I mean, I love that you called use the word vernacular, because obviously ego has, clinical implications, but it also has cultural implications. So the way I think about ego is probably influenced in some of both, but I think about ego as being kind of that true self,
Mhm.
right? Is that the super ego is like what I think I should be,
Mhm.
right? The ego is kind of all of who I am. Is that how you all think of it? Great.
And then we see the wounding of that ego of true self. Yeah.
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 So, and because we develop relationally, our sense of ourself forms in relationship to what our caregivers do in response to us, right? So if we make a mistake and our caregiver says, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Oh,
Mhm.
what that does, right?
Mhm.
Versus if we make a mistake and we have a secure caregiver who can go, "Oh no, oh buddy, shoot, that was disappointing. I'm going to calm myself down for a minute, but we're going to figure this out. Whatever happens, we figure it out together." Right? Well, now that part of me that makes mistakes is
Mhm.
acceptable. It's relational. It can be a part of how I see myself,
Right.
right? Versus if I have a rejection in those arenas, right? Well, now I feel shame.
Mhm.
And now I also feel paralysis, because if I mess up, something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say, like, coming into that place of like a deep healing around our ego, of feeling like I am enough, I
Mhm.
belong, I am worthy. That comes from having been in relationships with people who are warm, accepting, and understanding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Who aren't looking for us to perform or to be perfect in some unattainable way. They're wanting to connect with us as is, right? I think about like when you go to the store and you find something and it's like priced as is. Right. Like we're all as is objects here. Nobody,
Yeah.
nobody's got, like, without
Yeah.
scratches or
Yeah.
scars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what makes us connectable. Like I don't want to snuggle with a perfect person,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
right? Like I have a core need to be around other people who can go, "Oh yeah, me too. I have that too. We're all there." Yeah, no, nobody's perfect. You want to see my scruff? I got scruff. You got scruff? Right?
Mhm.
Like that's where security lies. Security lies in being imperfectly together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that goes to, attachment,
Mhm,
in early childhood, it's attachment, right?
mhm, mhm,
Regardless of what type of attachment it is, it's
mhm, mhm.
attachment. So
Yes,
whatever that caregiver is
yes,
communicating through that attachment, we
yes,
believe is true.
yes.
Yeah.
That's all you can. No child can go, "Wait a minute. I think my parent has a very disturbed state of mind and they're transferring it to me."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we absorb the states of mind of our caregivers.
Hmm.
I was working with a client recently who was processing that her mother was always threatened by other women. And so all other women were viewed as competitors for many different reasons, in business and life and looks and the whole nine yards. And she was like, in her 40s going, "I'm just now realizing that maybe other women aren't out to get me."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And like that she had absorbed that state of mind from her mother.
Mhm.
And her mother was very intrusive in that, it wasn't a passive state of mind. It was communicated actively all the time, right? So she could
Right.
feel it and hear it and absorb it. And the narrative was, coherent enough that it made sense to her little brain, right? And that's what's hard about being a child, is that children are incredibly easily influenced.
Mhm.
Um, I'm still working through even like the myth of Santa Claus, right?
Oh,
Like, but
yes.
my son is 8 and
Mama.
he's yeah, and he said to me, and I've never been a big pusher, so I've kind of been like neutral on Santa, where it's like I let my kids lead on how interested they are in that, which means I'm letting the culture lead and their teachers lead and all that stuff. But he said to me, he goes, "Either Santa's real or the parents have really pulled one over on us." And I was like, "What do you think? What do you think?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna push one way
Yeah.
or the other, but I think, gosh, or my daughter asked the other day, my 4-year-old, um, "So mom, where are fairies? are fairies real or make-believe? And I've been teaching them about how monsters are make-believe and how, whatever, fire-breathing dragons are make-believe. And I said really very quickly, like, oh, fairies are fun to think about, but fairies are make-believe. And then she goes, but then who takes my teeth?
You're like, "Oh."
Anyway, that's a bigger dilemma of like, how do you want to manage all of these cultural myths that we put onto children? But it just shows you, like, our children are willing to believe that someone comes down the chimney to
Mhm,
every house in the world, brings
mhm.
presents to everybody. Like, of course they're going to believe us when we say, you're
Yeah,
a really ungrateful little shit.
right,
And so I
Yeah.
think the damage that's done
Mhm.
in a relationship with an unhealthy caregiver in attachment is pretty profound. And it takes a long time to undo some of those beliefs and be like, wait a minute, maybe I wasn't spoiled.
Yeah,
Maybe I was just disappointed, and kids get disappointed.
yeah,
Wait a
yeah.
minute.
Wow, that
Mm,
was so beautifully said. It's so true. If we're going to believe these little stories that really
Mhm.
don't impact us on an everyday basis,
Mhm.
when we're getting feedback that we're an inconvenience, that we're
Mhm.
underfoot, that we're in the way, that our needs are somehow too much, our basic needs even are too
Yes.
much for our caregivers, that's
Yep.
going to wound in a very deep way. That's not going to be something that does not impact the
No.
next,
Yes.
friendship we have,
Yes.
relationship with
Yep.
teachers, peers,
Yep.
absolutely everything across the board. Oh, that's so
Definitely.
Eli, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
so welcome.
Yeah. Now you talk about the 4 A's
Mm.
when it comes to parenting and for your children. If you can give these 4 A's, correct, then you're creating a strong foundation.
Okay, so this is a post I made on social media, and I made it a while ago. So I'm going to do my best to remember what 4 A's I used.
Okay. I hope I can help.
Because it's not like
You do.
this is like a helpful, like, yes, help me.
Yeah.
So, well, one I know for sure is attunement. So we have to be attuned to our children, which means that we are accurately catching their emotional inner states, which
mhm,
just means that we ourselves are present enough to feel their feelings. I like to say attunement is like taking a tiny sip of what someone else is feeling, not a chug, and we're certainly not dumping it all over ourselves, but we're also not, saying no thank you to what they feel. We're allowing ourselves to feel enough so that our children can feel felt. It's
right.
so powerful. It's a
Mhm,
huge part of co-regulation. Um, is availability one of the ones I had on there? Availability. So we have to be
Yep.
available, right? And that means we have to have enough belief in connection. We have to be actually physically present. We have to communicate availability. I mean, a lot of what our kids need to hear is, hey, if you ever need me, I'm here. Okay.
right, right.
It doesn't matter how messy or weird or awkward, I got you.
Mhm,
Right. And then emotional availability, meaning we can handle what they feel. We can access our own emotions in such a way that they aren't uncomfortable bringing feelings to us.
mhm.
Um, now remind me of the other two.
I'm blanking as well. So I'll tell you what, why don't we reshare that on your social platform?
Great.
Then,
Perfect.
we'll send them over there. And by the way, everyone should follow Attachment Nerd
Oh,
on
thank you.
Instagram because it is such a joy to see you engaging with your followers, to watch you
Aw.
sharing playful, sometimes you're in costume, which is so much fun, and watching your excitement as your new
Mm,
book Securely Attached as
Mhm,
being shared and is finding an audience and
mm.
readership. It is an absolute pleasure, and we'll share that in our
Thank you so much.
discussion because truly I so enjoy it every day.
I love
And make sure
that.
to like it, people. Come on, don't just go past like, share.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay,
Thank
we
you.
should
Thank you.
get t-shirts
Oh,
made.
I remembered one of the other A's,
Okay.
adoration. Our children need to feel adored.
Yes.
So I talk about how you want to light up for your kids, like your dog lights up for you,
mhm.
wag your tail, shake your bottom,
Yeah.
drool a little bit, like,
Mhm,
hi, buddy, it's so good to see you. Good morning. Or it's so good to see you after school, right? Like, we want to be attuned, which means that we want to like recognize what they're feeling. So, like, don't jump up and down if they're in the middle of crying.
right.
But if they're just in a fairly regulated state, they're just walking in the room, like, give them joy. Let them feel that you delight in their presence. That is medicine for their self-confidence and for their belonging and for their ability to go out and adventure into the world.
Yeah.
That's a
And to
big
be,
one.
and to be received, right? Like I can come into a space and I can be received well, and
Yes.
people can really look forward to seeing me. Yeah.
Yes.
The author Tony Morrison, Tony
Oh,
Morrison talks about, do your eyes light up when your child
mm,
walks in the room, or do you scan them
Yeah.
looking for things that are in
mm,
disarray?
Right.
Are their shoes
oh,
tied? Is their shirt tucked?
oh,
Is that what you're doing, or are you just excited to see them? And I'm
beautiful.
paraphrasing there, and
I know,
it's
but she, man, oof,
yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
she's amazing.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Right. And I think that's the same thing for every relationship in our life, right?
Mhm,
Like when I see my friends, if the first thing out of my mouth is a complaint or,
mhm.
they're not feeling and welcomed,
Yes.
first you ground yourself
Yes.
and you are present and you
Mhm.
look them in the eye and you let them know, I'm so excited to be around you. And that should be across the board in our
Yes.
lives. And if it's
Absolutely.
not, yeah, and it's not always easy,
No,
but it's a good practice
I love
to get
that.
in. Yeah,
Amen.
it's good.
Mhm.
Okay. Christine, do you have any other questions for Eli? We're just starting, we're just touching
Oh,
upon
oh yeah. And this is
this
like my
topic.
favorite topic of conversation because I think, you probably know as a therapist, no matter who you work with, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's couples or adults, we always seem to come back to these early developmental
Mhm.
stages and
Absolutely.
just being able to attend and attune to those young parts is
Yes.
so important, whether it's the inner child or the child in front of us. I just so
Amen.
much the work you're doing. So
I love that. I love that. I love to be a part of this conversation.
It's
absolutely.
and we are so excited that you're sharing this information, Eli. And I
Yeah.
don't know, if like you were saying, there was a little insecurity, uncertainty. Yes,
Mm,
this is valuable information. People need this information.
thank you.
And it's one of those things they don't know how badly they need it
Mm,
until it's available.
yep.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for.
Oh,
This
I
is
love
amazing.
that.
Yeah.
I
So, what
love
piece
that.
of advice would you offer parents in general with attachment
Hmm.
when it comes to, healing their own and then
Hmm.
creating secure attachment with their children?
Well, I would just leave you all this. So if you're a parent and you're going, oh my gosh, how do I do this? I don't even know. This feels so overwhelming. I want you to remember this. There is no such thing as a person who is unworthy of connection. There's no such thing. So if you have not had connection that you've needed in your life, it never was your fault.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
couldn't give it to you, but you deserved it. And so when you start to recognize that, and you start to go back into those younger memories, those younger places. So as you go through Securely Attached, the workbook, which I would say, grab a pal, do it with someone else. Because there's so much power in having someone else witness your stories and go, oh my gosh, like I feel so much compassion for younger you. And then you go, oh, I was blaming younger me for that. And they're like, how could that have been your fault? You were 3. And then you're like, oh, I was 3. You're right.
Mm.
That process of beginning to really look upon our younger selves with compassion is the fuel we need to look upon our children with compassion. So offer yourself the kind of compassion that you want to be able to offer your children, and that's the direction it will work. Like just keep fueling it out and ask for help. And when you mess up, say you're sorry. And I'm just so glad y'all are here.
Yeah, we so appreciate you for sure.
So beautiful. We're going to make sure that the link is in
Great.
our discussion so that people can purchase Securely Attached. I've already bought copies for friends for Christmas, and I'm
Thank
going to be
you.
doing my own, and it arrived today and I don't have it, and I'm so disappointed. But I'm so excited. I truly believe this is the first step on a very long staircase
Thank you.
of what we can learn about attachment. And thank you for being our guide, Eli.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for all the work you're doing in the world.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to follow Attachment Nerd as well, and buy this book for yourself and everyone except maybe your ex. I said
I
it.
made that joke today. I
Even
like
though they
maybe
didn't want
not.
to.
Unraveling.
Unless you're good friends, you know.
Well, and it just makes you so much more compassionate, right? When you
Yeah.
realize that we all have a wounding around this.
Yes.
And doing the workbook means that if I can do the workbook,
Mhm.
then anyone can do it.
Yes.
And they're
Amen.
going to learn as well and grow. So thank you, Eli. All right, everyone. We will see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.